My name is Jason S. Seafong, the host of Vanilla Club podcast. Today's episode is with Honest Sorcerer, a person of many contrasts who puts forth a name for himself that is itself a paradox. Honest Sorcerer is a self-described critic of modern times, offering ideas for honest contemplation, to use his words. I came across Honest Sorcerer's writing on Substack and was struck by his stark, no-nonsense approach to the energy crisis that we're all facing. He's an anonymous narrator of the Earth's PolyCrisis. Don't worry, he explains what this is and talks about our overuse and dependence on finite resources, a one-time inheritance, as well as the fragility of our modern systems and civilization. A random walk through Honest Sorcerer Substack is not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. In this episode, Honest Sorcerer takes us back to his awakening from a hopeful mechanical engineering student who believed that technology was synonymous with optimism and could solve the woes of the world, to the less optimistic, let's say, more honest truth teller that we see today. He also paints a dark picture of what he thinks our future will look like if we continue with our consumptive and extractive ways. But he also reminds us that there is a sunnier side to the inevitable collapse. It is still a beautiful world, one where many simple things are still for us to enjoy. There's a link in the show notes to support Honest Sorcerer. Please buy him a coffee. We hope you enjoy. Indigenous voices matter.
Today on the Vanilla Club podcast, we have a very special guest, someone with a unique ability to talk about elements of a polycrisis that us Earthlings are witnessing in many ways unfold before our eyes. Honest Sorcerer, if you don't follow him on Substack, smash that like button, take the guy to get a coffee, one virtual coffee, support the guy's work. He is a must follow on Substack. Let's make sure that Indigenous voices are heard. They matter. And with that, I want to welcome to the show, the Honest Sorcerer. Welcome.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Welcome.
Great. That's fantastic. So if we could just dive in, I would love to try to understand what we mean by the phrase polycrisis.
Polycrisis is a convergence of many crises at the same time. And it's all due to our civilization being in overshoot. So we are just overshooting every aspect of our living planet, be it planetary boundaries, or be them as simple things as how many people this planet can sustain for a long period of time. So currently we are in a quite an illusionary period, supported by fossil fuels, that we can sustain this kind of living forever, believing that we can, just go to Mars and go to anywhere else we want on the planet and then do just whatever we want. Meanwhile, forgetting that we are on a finite resource base, which is depleting very fast, and we are using it in an exponential rate. So this is the critical issue we are facing here, that we are not noticing that we are just eating up our one-time inheritance on this planet in a rapid pace. And this has many, many consequences, from deforestation to species loss to climate change to worsening energy returns on investment, be them fossil fuels or solar and wind as well. We can talk about that later if you wish. And there are many, many other aspects, including wars, geopolitical crisis, debts. Everything is connected basically to this core issue that we are just simply living up a one-time inheritance at a breakneck speed, and then we are just fighting over what remains.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you also for not hesitating with what was probably the most difficult question to start with. That is not an easy question. And I think that one of the difficulties, if I may just suggest, one of the reasons why so many of us find it, in a sense, easy to turn away from this, right? Back to our conveniences, back to the, pane and circusi, right? That we have in our comfortable lives, is that so much of this is interlinked, and it is not that simple. They are interlinked in complex ways. And if you read some of your latest writing, right, energy links to conflict, which links to resource allocations, which links to credit bubbles. And it's not that we can pinpoint with a silver bullet, with a high degree of accuracy, one single problem. It's multiple things happening in multiple places, with linkages that we know are there, but empirically it's hard to identify them with certainty.
Yes, exactly. And this is, you mentioned denial. It's a core aspect of our predicament, but many of us are just still in denial of the nature of this predicament and the depth of this issue which we are facing right now. Many believe that this is just a political issue, or this is just a financial issue. That people just tend to focus on one certain aspect of the issue, be it climate change or be it economical problems or debts or wars and things like that. And if you focus on one thing from the PolyCrisis, you might tend to believe that, okay, that's easy. We can solve it with this or that agreement, or we can make this or that adjustment to the system, or replace fossil fuels with renewables, and then everything will be solved. But if you look at the thing in its entirety, then you realize that, hey, if I replace fossil fuels, for example, with renewables, this is not a one-to-one replacement, because fossil fuels provide primary heat, which is necessary to produce renewables themselves, because they are themselves made of materials which require carbon to be burned. And this is not just a vague idea that we need to burn carbon because we have so many of it, but because of the chemical properties of carbon itself. So, for example, if you want to make silicon panels, for example, in solar panels, the silicon wafers, if you mine the rock itself, mine quartz rock, you have to burn it together with carbon. It's really a simple chemical formula, replacing the silicon atom with the carbon atom in a silicon oxide formula, which is very simple in paper, and it's the simplest way to get rid of all those pesky oxygen atoms and get pure silica. And many people don't realize that without fossil fuels, it will be impossible to produce renewables, or even as simple as a thing as a solar panel or a silicon wafer to produce chips and things like that. So once fossil fuels are out, and I don't mean we will run out of them, but we will run out of the portion which is the easy to access, easy to mine, easy to get to the surface part, then we will have serious difficulties. And this is what we are already starting to face. And if you are following the energy trends, you can already see that we are on a high plateau in terms of coal usage, and also in terms of oil usage. And economists try to describe it as a normal phenomenon. We are reaching peak demand, and then we will replace everything with electricity, and then all will be fine, not realizing that this will simply undermine our capability to produce electricity, or produce the very machines which will produce electricity. So this is going to be a serious issue in the coming decades ahead, and nobody is aware of it. And everybody believes that, okay, we just replace one part of the system with another part, and then all will be fine. But that's not the case.
So maybe we can frame the discussion by talking a little bit about the basic scientific reality, the inescapable engineering and, as you say, chemical and physical certainties that you're talking about. And then from there, we can start exploring a little bit the linkages that we see in our daily lives, and the level of fragility that we have that we take for granted. Where we start is, let's take something that I think one of the big assumptions that we have in our modern consumptive lifestyle, right, let's take electric vehicles. One thing that I think for lay people looking at electric vehicles, right, is that we are told that somehow there's some net gain in terms of the energy efficiency that is going to result in a fleet transformation from internal combustion engines to, battery-driven electric vehicles. It seems like there are so many components that depend on, as you say, fossil fuels. There's rubbers, there's petrochemicals in the tires, there's all of the pollutants, and when you consider the half-life of the batteries, there's the roads that the cars need to drive on that are all essentially made of petrochemicals. Where is the gain to be achieved with the consumer products that we are told are green?
Yeah, it's a very good idea to start with electric vehicles, because in the narrow boundary view, if you just look at the vehicle itself and your charging station as a whole, as a miniature system within its much wider boundary of roads and petrochemicals and things like that, if you just view the vehicle itself and the charger, you might tend to believe that this is very efficient because I'm using electricity from the wall socket, plug it into my car, and then my car will use it up with an 80+% efficiency, which is really good. So this is what this is the main selling point of electric vehicles, that they are very, very energy efficient when it comes to using up electricity which has been already produced, stored in a battery, and then regained from that battery and then used up by the motor. So that's the primary idea behind electric vehicles. What is not taken into consideration is many items which are required to make this system work, from electricity networks to road networks, which are basically the byproduct of distilling oil. So once we are running out of oil, or just running low on oil, not running out, but just running lower on oil, we will not be able to produce as many asphalt as we use. So we'll have to return to concrete pavement, which is then require coal to be burned, because you can again, due to the chemical formulas involved, you need carbon atoms to get rid of the oxygen from limestone, which is the basis of making cement, which is required to build roads. So again, you are viewing a little bit wider boundary, just going out the street, you start to realize that, hey, many of the items which are taken for granted are actually provided by fossil fuels themselves. So just replacing one part of it, the car itself, will not solve the whole issue. And if you are going back to the question of energy efficiency, if you're, again, taking a wider boundary lens, and then just, see what's beyond my wall socket. How does the electricity get there? It's partially provided by fossil fuels because renewables alone cannot provide stable electricity supply. And then if you are just looking at a more wider lens, everything which is in the electric network, from cables, overhead cables, transformer stations, inverters, and every other little electric gear which is used to drive the electric system, requires mining, because it's all built up of one-time minerals like copper, aluminum, and similar materials which are mined from hard rock. And then that hard rock has to be delivered on trucks, which are capable of carrying hundreds of tons of rocks from a mining pit, and then crushed by machines which are powered by again fossil fuels, and then smelted by burning coal or natural gas. So everything ties back to this fossil fuel use, and this is why it is so hard to remove fossil fuels from the picture, because they are actually physically and chemically necessary for many of the processes. And this is the biggest issue we are facing right now, that we are peaking of all of these fossil fuels, and then we will have no idea what to do when we are on the downslope. And it doesn't have to be, a peak and fall like, falling off a cliff. It can be a very gentle slope viewed from a historical lens. So let's say we will halve the carbon emissions from fossil fuels due to depletion by, let's say, middle of the century, in 25 years. That looks gentle enough, but it's still going to be causing a lot of issues, major issues, because we will simply not be able to maintain the system as it is. And if you look at GDP growth, for example, which is tend to be 3 to 5% in the past few decades. That means that 95% or 97% of our economic production goes basically to maintain what we already have. And if you are considering that we are having more wildfires, more frequent storms and things like that, it will increase the maintenance cost. And also due to the aging infrastructure, again, circling back to electricity, we will have more and more maintenance costs, which will simply eat away even this tiny sliver of growth potential. This 2 or 3% growth potential will be simply eaten away by increasing maintenance costs. And if we have failed to maintain our networks, be it electricity network or water networks and things like that, then we will simply not be able to produce as much because electricity will be out, factories will be on downtime, they will not be producing as much material. So we simply tend to forget that basically this whole civilization is as a huge machine which is consuming a lot of materials, a lot of energy just to maintain itself. Again, 97% of the energy and materials goes into just maintenance, to stay where it is. And we are again talking about finite reserves of materials which will tend to deplete over time. This means that once depletion starts in a very gentle slope, again, 3 to 4% per year, not too much, then it will quickly eat into our maintenance budget, and we will not be able to maintain as the system as it is. So what remains? That's the big question right now.
Mm. So again, in your Bye Bye Saudi America article, which is definitely a must read, you speak directly to these diminishing returns, right? And we're talking about like compounding diminishing returns, where even mid-century you had something like 100 to 1, right? You use that metaphor of cooking a stew with fatty meat and the rich fats rising to the surface, and we're talking about a major return on investment in terms of financially and in terms of calories, right?
Exactly.
But now we're looking at like gas to the gas to oil conversion ratio is like below 10 to 1 to 10. It's dropping by an order of magnitude and going even lower.
Exactly, and that's a major issue. So you tapped right into the heart of the issue, that these fossil fuels and these materials we use, be them copper or be them any kind of ore, or in this case oil, is not a uniform quality, not of a uniform quality. So this means that we are first eating the best quality stuff because that's the easiest to get. Again, back to this meat stew example, we are just skimming off the fatty liquids from the top, which is very nice, very calorie intensive, and then very, very good to build a civilization on. But once we are over with that fatty portion, what will remain is this watery, salty liquid at the bottom of the stew, which contains not too much meat, just the sauce itself, a lot of salt, a lot of water, but not too much calories in it. And this is exactly the situation with the Permian Basin or any other geological basin where oil is captured, because we are basically draining ancient seas. So these are ancient seabeds which we are drilling into, which was covered in sediment, but also locked in a lot of seawater and a lot of sea life, which is then cooked to perfection under ideal conditions of pressure and heat. They are cooked to oil, which is rising to the surface. And once we are drilling and then sucking that very oil from the surface, what remains is basically salty seawater mixed with a little bit of oil and a lot of gas dissolved in it. And once we get to this watery substance, we will have a huge issue, and this is what we're already facing in the Permian, that we are producing actually 4 to 5 times more water than oil itself, which is a huge problem because we're just creating an inland sea in Texas, and we have a huge issue where to put that very salty, very polluted brine, basically, which contains a lot of chemical compounds, which is toxic to life, very harmful to life, because it is, it's half mix of oil, mix of benzene and other components which are
Arsenic.
really truly toxic. Arsenic, heavy metals. This is a very toxic stew, and it was buried for a good reason, because this is toxic and life could not thrive on it. So we have to either purify it, which again takes more energy, or have to pump it back underground into empty caverns, which again takes energy because you have to pump it under pressure because the rocks are just squeezing. If you suck some liquid out of the ground, rocks tend to collapse on that cavity. And if you're trying to push back the liquid underground, you will have to again lift those rocks, and it requires huge amount of pressure to push everything underground, which again takes up energy. And this is where we come to this energy return on investment picture. Back to back to 100 years ago, when oil was discovered in Texas, or a little bit earlier than that. It was discovered earlier than that, but back in the early decades of the 20th century, we were just drilling a tiny hole in the ground close to surface liquids, which basically pure oil. We were just draining that pure oil. It was under pressure, so we didn't even have to employ pumps. They just burst into the surface. It required very little energy to drill that hole and to get that oil out. Versus today, we have to invest a lot of energy to get very, very deep under the rocks, suck out some brine, which then has to be discarded, and then skim off very little oil what we have on top of that brine. So this is a really, really, really bad return on investment, and this is why we have to have an increasing oil price to support that activity. So this is basically the story of depletion. It's not really a story of running out of stuff. There is plenty of seawater underground still. But if it's just a polluted, salty brine and not pure oil, we are just having to have more and more problems with it, which will require more and more energy to handle, which will then eat into the maintenance budget of this civilization. We will not be able to maintain civilization as it is if we have to invest more and more energy back into getting more energy. This is going to be a self-defeating proposition very soon.
So you could, for a little while, right, on a totally unsustainable basis, have maybe a decade or two where the light, sweet crude, like the really good stuff, shoots up in price. And before that has a chance to play itself out. Maybe the investment world is excited about that because oil prices go up to $300 a barrel.
But that's impossible. That's economically impossible. And this is the economic limitation on civilization itself, because oil is used everywhere, and especially the diesel portion, which is the middle part of the oil, the fattiest part of the oil, the best part of oil is basically diesel and middle distillates. Gasoline is the lightest part of oil, which is plentiful, but not very useful when driving huge machines, because it produces a lot of heat as a side effect. These fattier parts of oil, diesel and middle distillates, are actually the sweet spot of petroleum, because these are the most energy dense part of oil, producing very little heat compared to the pressure they are producing in pistons and engines. So they are the ideal fuel to power heavy machinery like agricultural machinery, combined harvesters, and those huge tractors which are driving on the fields, and also heavy trucks which are carrying the goods from point A to point B, and also these heavy container ships which are circling the globe with packed full of goods. So if we are running out of this portion of oil, and the problem is that we are running out because we are getting lighter and lighter stuff, as you mentioned, we will have less and less diesel available. It will directly impact civilization's ability to replenish itself, to replenish the goods on the shelf, to replenish ores from mines, because then we will have a huge problem how to drive to the mine, how to get more and more ore out of the mine, and how to process those ores with less and less diesel. And this is so much of an acute problem that Bolivia last year has lost a major portion of its crops due to a diesel shortage. They didn't have enough fuel to harvest all the crops. So this is going to be a major issue, putting a hard limitation on civilization itself, even food production, to producing basically just about everything.
When we talk about carrying capacity, right, it's overshoot, right? I mean, it's hard to, I guess, maybe we need to jump in a little bit and talk about the economic aspect of this in order to help frame the severity of the situation and the likely impacts that we're going to face as humanity on Earth.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a very huge problem, because historically we tended to solve overpopulation issues with technology. And then we say, oh, overpopulation is not a problem because we have technology. In the early days of civilization, this meant agriculture. Simply, Earth could not support more hunter-gatherers than it did 10,000 years ago. And hunter-gatherer tribes were pushed out from the best lands, where the best hunting grounds were, where the best fruits grown. And they were pushed into some less productive areas, like in Mesopotamia, which is basically a hot swamp. It's not very hospitable for humans and for the prey animals humans are preying on. So people pushed out into this swampland had to figure out how to produce food. And this is when they came across some grass types which produced edible seeds, wheat and rye and all the rest of the food crops. And they started to grow these food crops, and they discovered that they contain more energy than hunter-gathering food alone. So they could grow their population. Simply, they could produce so much food based on this ideal conditions for growing this type of grasses in a swamp which is full of nutrients, but lacking large animals and lacking large trees and things like that. They were able to produce a lot of food, feed a huge population, and then this required them to be settled and build cities to house this many people as efficiently as possible to leave as much room as possible for growing crops. And this situation basically lifted the carrying capacity of that area. So previously, before inventing agriculture, that area could support, I don't know, one tribe or two tribes. But after inventing agriculture and inventing the necessary technologies to lift the carrying capacity, they could support tens of thousands of people because they can be fed. The thing that they haven't realized at the beginning, that they are also running on a finite reserve of fertile land. And this is how they just simply overuse the land and also chop down all the trees in the higher mountainous areas to replicate the same success of these lowland people. And then due to this chopping of trees, rains were pushed north and north, more northwards. And then this was creating problems also downstream in the river, and also washed down all the topsoil and all the heavy nutrients from the mountains to the valley, and then flushed it into the Gulf of Persia, which we are having in the news already. So this meant that they were just simply living up a one-time inheritance of wood and of topsoil, which then they both destroyed during their civilization building attempt. And what we have as a result, if you look around in Iraq and the present-day Mesopotamia, what you see is desert. No topsoil, no water, no nothing, just heat and rocks everywhere. And this is how civilization destroyed its very own basis. And now it would be impossible to restart, Mesopotamia or restart an agricultural civilization there without the help of fossil fuels. And before fossil fuels came into the picture, this was a sparsely inhabited land. Few nomad tribes were just, crisscrossing the land, but nobody was really living there. Dubai, for example, and cities like that were just small shacks in the sand. And then fossil fuels came into the picture, and then agriculture again became viable in these locations, because then with the use of fossil fuels we can replace nutrients in the soil, we can produce nitrates from methane, for example, which is natural gas, and we can also produce a lot of food by using tractors, by using tilling machines and things like that, which will help again recover the topsoil and recover the nutrients from the deep buried topsoil, which then made these cities and these locations again livable, and which made them possible to grow more food. And also the same revolution happened all across the world. So from India to China to the rest of the world, this green revolution of using fossil fuels and then special seed varieties which make more harvest possible. this helped to increase again the carrying capacity of the entire planet. So not only just one area, but basically the entire globe was turbocharged with this fossil fuel bonanza we had enjoyed in the past 7 to 8 decades. But if this bonanza is coming to an end, we will not be able to produce as much food, again, because of this diesel crisis, for example. This could be one issue. Another issue could be the rising price of fertilizer, because if we are running low on natural gas, then it will be more expensive, which will make fertilizer production more expensive, which in turn make food production more expensive. And this is why we are seeing these rising food prices on the supermarkets. So this is how things are connected. And basically, this is perfectly, how to say, normal for this kind of system if you realize how it works. Of course, because if we are running low of materials, prices tend to rise. But this means that we will spend all our money on necessities like food and energy and shelter, which means that we will have very little money left for anything else, like cars or like electric vehicles and computers and things like that. Many people will not be able to afford these products. Thus, the demand for these products will again decrease, making more room available for agriculture. So basically, we are just sliding back to an agricultural society from an industrial society very, very slowly as fossil fuels deplete. And the problem will come when we can no longer, sacrifice computers and electric vehicles because there will be long gone. And then all of the fuel will have to be spent on producing more fuel and producing energy for society, as known as food. So when we are down to the very basic of producing energy for ourselves, then we will have to basically cut back on food consumption, which then will create huge issues in many parts of the world. And also, being human, we tend to solve these issues with wars and then just decimate each other just to get rid of the unwanted population who are just trying to migrate here or just trying to get our food and get our stuff. This is the this is the pessimistic scenario. But in the optimistic scenario, and you will also laugh on the optimistic scenario, because in the optimistic scenario, this means that this lowering standards of living will force people to abandon dreams of having, families with 5 or 6 children. But they think twice even to have one child, not let alone 2 or 3. So they will simply just cut back on family plans and then just forego another child or forego, childbearing at all, which will mean that populations will naturally decrease in face of the hardship. And if we can draw out this depletion period long enough, and we can sustain energy production for ourselves at least to maintain, basic shelter and basic food for everyone, then we can ride out this period of slow decline by just simply decreased birth rates and decreased population levels. By totally natural means, without wars or without epidemics and without things like that. So it is possible in an optimistic scenario to ride this out, in perfectly smoothly. But knowing our leaders, I think we are more headed like towards the war scenario, and then just trying to kill each other over things which we could, distribute more equitably.
Thank you for that. So, I come from the city. Most of my friends all of my friends are city people. They're big city people. They're finance people. They're bankers, hedge fund people. There's, some software people. These are people I went to school with, that I grew up with. If they heard this, first of all, the natural social defense mechanism, like you say, the D word comes out, denial. Yeah. There's like flares that fire off and so on and so forth. But I think that one of the grand assumptions that my people would walk around with is that, don't worry about it. The market will sort itself out. Adam Smith's invisible hand, it'll work itself out. But really, from what you just said in such an eloquent way just then in that segment, it seems I just wanted to offer 2 prompts to you. Number one is that in some sense, those people sound insane, right? That you think that you're that naive that you just think that the market will sort itself out. The second prompt is, in a sense, Mother Nature is the ultimate market maker. And in a sense, this is the market playing itself out. This is, okay, fine. You want to play that game? You want to be that stupid? You want to be that profligate? Great. I'm going to take your input cost and I'm going to raise them 100 times. Now, here's your market for you. You figure it out.
Exactly. And this is a very good point you touched upon. So basically, again, you mentioned capitalism is figuring out the best way to allocate resources and allocate revenues. But if resources are scarce, then it will mercilessly kill those companies which are not compatible with this new scenario or not profitable enough. So this will just simply take care of the issue by themselves. So the invisible hand could carry a gun as well, not only a plow shell and things
exactly.
like that. It can carry a gun and then kill those companies which are not profitable. And this is what we are going to see in the future. So the invisible hand will kill every economy which is not able to feed itself in terms of energy and in terms of resources. And many people mention here the alternatives. Okay, what about hydrogen, the hydrogen economy, or what about synthetic fuels and things like that? But these are much more energy intensive than any previous attempts made at getting even the hardest possible oil on this planet. Producing hydrogen is a net energy loss. If you just invest 100 kilowatts of energy, you will just get 30 back at the very end of this fuel cycle. And then from that 30%, you still have to sacrifice a few percentage points for inefficiencies, which basically means you just lost 3/4 of your energy on nothing, and you just get one back. This is a really crazy situation we are in, because we are still believing that these technical solutions, which are only possible again due to fossil fuels, because there are plenty of fossil fuels still on the ground, which can provide us with this dream scenario of having a civilization which can feed itself, which can replenish its lost materials and energy. This makes these fantasy solutions, hydrogen, synthetic fuels, and things like that, viable. But in and of themselves, these fuels are totally non-viable and will prove to be a huge bust. And this is the big issue here, because we are tending to go back to denial, as you mentioned, and everybody will just, the business situation hasn't worsened that much in the past year. Okay, it got a little bit worse. Nothing will happen. Okay, there might be a crisis, but then we will recover. This type of fairy tales we tell ourselves, that everything will be nice in the end. But again, as we have started this segment of this conversation, we can realize that there will be no happy ending. If you want that, go and watch a Disney movie.
But even the Disney movies, sometimes, they have a little curveball. This is, I think, when people want to have this fantasy, like Elon Musk wants to, he takes the pencil, one of his tweets about the pencil, to signal, to channel Milton Friedman and, Milton Friedman's, version of economics, of capitalism. The thing is that in so many ways, the system that we, live and operate in is rigged. It's a casino in many ways. What you're talking about, in some ways, it's a pure, it's a pure jungle economics. Where this is just going to be punishing. Maybe there's a time where, as the slope goes down, some market forces are able to harness it, but it's going to be brutal for the non-competing firms out there, in this transition period. Is it not?
It is, and it can be already felt in Europe. In Europe, the industries are really suffering due to a lack of energy, lack of competitive power when it comes especially to Asia. We are losing market share in a crazy speed. And also we are losing our profitability, because energy prices are so high in Europe due to this idiotic affair in Eastern Europe that that totally makes us uncompetitive on the market. And we are losing customer orders that are not coming in. We are losing production volumes. We cannot produce as much because there are not more orders. And this is what actually puts a brake on the energy prices themselves. And circling back to an earlier question, this is why oil cannot rise to $200 per barrel or even $300 per barrel, because if this is such a crucial input to the economy, but if its price rises so high, then it will make the entire economy totally uncompetitive. And if it rises globally to this level, and not only just in one region like in Europe, if it rises globally, then it will simply, the competition will play out in the customer's hand. So the customer will have to decide, either I feed myself and my family or buy this next shiny gadget. And then 9 out of 10 people will choose the food and not the shiny gadget, and will put it back on the shelf on the supermarket. And then again, customer demand will disappear. Production volumes will go down, which will take down energy prices, because then not much more energy will be needed. So this is a self-regulating system which is above a certain price level, be it oil price or be it the price of natural gas, simply steers back to its normal range, because it cannot simply sustain itself at such a high levels of energy prices. But this is how the system kills itself, and this is why oil production becomes uneconomic. Even though we have a lot of oil, billions of barrels underground still, which could feed us for decades more, we will not be able to harness it, because, as we mentioned earlier, the energy cost of getting this oil is getting higher and higher, and there are more materials and energy has to be reinvested into production wells, which means that the cost of producing this oil will also increase. And this is what we are already seeing in the Permian Basin, the most energy intensive part of the American continent. Okay, next to Canada. That's even more. That's an even worse situation there. But in the Permian Basin alone, below $65 per barrel price, it is not worth investing in new wells. And even this $65 per barrel price will not hold long enough, because next year this might be 70. Next year after, it can be 75, because we will have to drill deeper, have to drill longer laterals, have to put in much more steel pipes, which again takes energy costs to produce, and also put more sand in the well, because sand is used in fracking operation to fracking these wells open, which means that more and more investment will have to be done to compensate for the price of oil. And if the oil price cannot rise high enough, and this is a really crazy situation we are seeing right now, because the last time I checked, oil price was around $75 per barrel, even if there was a huge clash over Iran. And then the threats of closing the Hormuz Strait was already in the air, and the oil price barely nudged. It increased $10, and then, okay, that's all. Simply, investors are not, as I see it and as I read the signals, investors are not willing to invest into very pricey oil, because they know that they can burn themselves. They will not be able to sell it a few months later when the economy again goes into downturn due to the high oil prices. So if I buy oil at $75 per barrel and hold it as an investment, and next month the oil price will go back to 65, because the economy cannot afford more than 65, then I'm going to have a net loss. So investors are either cautious not to invest into oil, because they will have to incur a loss. And this again puts a price brake on oil itself, which will prevent it from rising to a very high level. And I'm not saying this cannot spike. So if a ship is being hit with a rocket in let's say in the Hormuz Strait or in the Persian Gulf, and then it sinks, then everybody will be shocked. Okay, the price will go up for a minute, I don't know, $120. But then again, due to the dampening effect of the economy, the price will come down very fast again. And this spike and fall will repeat itself a few more times, until as many oil producers will run out of the economic viable grounds and economically viable oil wells, that they will simply not be able to produce as much as they used to a year or two ago. And then the supply of oil will start to come down very slowly, very tentatively, then oil price will just again spike back because there is a supply shortage, but then the economy will again be dampened by the high oil price, which will then lead to, again, a fall in oil prices, which will then again lead to lower production. And this stepwise approach will continue for, I don't know, decades, until we just basically hit the rock bottom and run out of every portion of affordable oil, affordable at the current price levels.
It's a currency, right? In that sense, it's like the Bitcoin lobby would, they talk about Bitcoin as a currency, but really, it's a speculative asset, right? Everyone wants the price to go up, but for it to be a currency, you want the price to go down, right? So there's an economic reality to what you're talking about, where it can jump up. Like you said, there's a threat of the Straits of Hormuz, and then it went back down another 8%, right? It went up and then back down.
Yes. The currency of life is energy itself, and it always was before humans. Sunlight hitting the earth produced calories in plants, which then it was eaten by plant eaters, which then was eaten in turn by carnivores. And this energy cycles through the system until it fully dissipated and then fully lived up, and then it was replenished by the sun itself. But this is a very low energy cycle. This is nothing what we experience today with fossil fuels. This fossil fuels just really turbocharged everything, and once we are running low on them, the turbocharge effect will quickly vanish, which will create this type of problems which we are discussing. And this is why I say, and this is why many people say that currency is really just nothing but claims on energy. It's nothing valuable in and of itself. If you cannot buy energy with currency, you just it is useless for you. So if you are stuck on an island alone with a bag of cash, you will have no use of that cash at all. You will have to find your energy sources alone, and then harvest fruits or go fishing or do something to feed yourself, because nobody is living on the island doing it for you. So you cannot exchange your money, your bag of cash in that island for valuable work which produces energy for yourself and for your family if you have one. So this is why it's very tentative that we have this bubble of cryptocurrencies. This is a pure bubble effect, like the tulip revolution in the Middle Ages, when tulips were so highly priced that they were worth more than a castle. This is the same situation here. In and of themselves, they have no value at all. No, neither cryptocurrencies, neither dollars, or neither any other currency.
So if we go back to your frame about the optimistic scenario versus the pessimistic scenario, let's talk about the pessimistic scenario for a second. If one were to elect some council, right? Let's say the United Nations, somehow was, the global powers, came together and said, we're going to bestow authority on the United Nations as an institution to now in some way manage this process. We've acknowledged the severity of the situation before the fact. This would never happen. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you could imagine a scenario where enlightened peoples, right, some institution, global institution came up with a set of, some charter that they could back with some type of executive power to take on certain steps for humanity to manage this process, right, from 2025 into the future. What would the sort of top 5 things be in your view for them to do?
For them to do, the first thing is to dismantle all the armies and all the nuclear weapons. That would be the first thing to do. And dismantle all the armaments manufacturers together, and then totally demolish those plants, not to able to produce any more armaments because they are very, very energy intensive to make. They consume a huge amount of energy. Explosives actually are a dense packed energy. It's also made of fossil fuels, just to just to say. And also the huge amount of steel which goes into armaments, it's crazy. We are not aware how much fuel is being burned by militaries. It is a very crazy approach. So if there would be a world government, a benevolent world government, but this is totally impossible, as you mentioned, then it would start by eliminating all the armies in the world, and then start rationing energy and resources according to need. So where it's needed the most. So if let's say if it's more needed in Africa, then it will be invested there. If it's more needed in North America for a certain reason, then it will be invested there. So there should be a central mechanism to distribute energy in a more equitable way, not this market free-for-all type of manner where the poor people just die starving, and while the rich people, throw out food in the window because they have just so many food. So this has to be more equitable, and then family planning could be also part of the picture, and also planning the investments in terms of roads or in terms of infrastructure very, very wisely, and with a long decline in mind. So not trying to maintain the existing system forever, but also trying to build out a system which is more compatible with a low energy lifestyle. Again, going back to rural lifestyles, supporting people returning to the farmlands, producing food themselves, establishing schools to teach how to grow food yourself, how to plant food gardens, how to plant food forests even. That's a very good approach. Yeah,
I love it.
That's a very good approach. How to increase the carrying capacity of the land without fossil fuels. And this was basically a hidden revolution in the 20th or the early 21st century. This sustainable food growing practices, which are not relying on heavy machinery and tilling and pesticides and chemicals, but relying on knowledge of what plants to pair with each other, how to grow sustainable ecosystems around yourself, which then provide food all around the year. So this knowledge has to be spread. People have to be trained how to use this knowledge, how to take care of themselves, and then this basically will mean that the state itself and the state bureaucracy will have to be dismantled, because it's also a huge drag on the system. They are eating up a lot of resources, and then companies themselves would have to be dismantled, and then they have to be get rid of in terms of power structures, because currently corporations are just buying power left and right. They do not care about the future of the planet, or not the future of the nation they are residing in. They are just buying powerful politicians who then carry out their will, which is really an awful situation we are in. So this has to be also stopped, that politicians could be bought by corporations, and then at the final stages, basically the economy will have to be transformed back into its very basic form before the Industrial Revolution began, and hopefully without kings, without feudal lords and then things like that, but on a more democratic and more equitable basis. But again, this is a wet dream. So this is so far from reality and so unrealistic in the current scenario that the system first will have to, I have to say, the system first have to die. And once the system is dead and then gone forever, then we can start rebuilding according to these principles, and then start anew as a new civilization, which is more eco-friendly and more eco-conscious.
Honest Sorcerer, when you're talking, my mind was trying to think of ways that we could avoid conflict in one or more of these scenarios, and I'm really struggling. I'm really struggling to see a future where we accept the basic concepts that you're talking about, and we are able to avoid not just like conflicts here and there, but something really major, because human nature is, if we know anything, it's that people aren't going to give up power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Voluntarily. And that even if, this is why this scenario is so dark, and it's not, it's something that it's hard to bring up in pleasant company. But the reality is that if we do reach a scenario where the transactions are zero sum, it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where people just say, okay, let's sort of try to cooperate, as opposed to, no, I'm going to bash you on the head and then take yours and then see if I can survive on my own, and maybe me and my friends, and then I'll kill them later.
Maybe this is why it's better not to have a wider audience for this for this type of knowledge, because if politicians were aware of these situations, wholeheartedly accept the situation as it is, as we described, then they would immediately start a nuclear war or things like that, because then they would believe, oh, this is the time to get rid of my enemies, and then I can use the resources and things like that. So maybe it's better that they are still in a delusional phase, that they can keep their power, or they can somehow survive this situation. Again, let's hope that they will not realize, because then they will start a huge war. But again, the system can collapse under its own weight, even without the help of the leaders. So actually, the clown show which is going on in the United States is really crazy, and a very good example how the system basically self-terminates. Even despite the best intentions, or even the best interests of their sponsors, the system is simply dismantling itself. This global world-spanning empire is just falling apart in front of our eyes in a very rapid pace. The recent clash over Iran, and I just read the news that a truce was made. I don't know if they kept the truce between Israel and Iran. This could be a signal that there are much bigger powers at play in the background. So somehow they realize that they cannot do a land invasion or a protected war of attrition between each other, and maybe they realize that, okay, this is unrealistic that we can keep up this situation for long, so let's make a truce instead, and let's try to live more peacefully with each other. I'm sure that the other great players like Russia and China played a huge role in this, trying to negotiate an end to this situation, and I hope it will last. Maybe the next time I open my web browser, it will be again the news of missiles coming down again. It can be the situation, but I believe that the world political system has its own self-dampening mechanism. It also prevents people getting too powerful or too crazy, and trying to keep them in check. And this is actually my hope in the system, that as the system gets more multipolar and more distributed across the planet, then one person, be it an American president or be it a Russian president, whatever, cannot be able to press the red button and start a nuclear war, because there will be others in the background, in the back channel communications, who will try to persuade this person not to do this. And I'm sure that things are, this type of discussions are going on in the background. If we could listen into these discussions, we would be frightened to death, because I'm sure that in many times in the past 2 or 3 years, for example, and I'm sure that many times the prospect of nuclear war came very close to become a reality. And then somehow we survived, and I hope that we will survive. Again, this is just blind faith and hope. I have no reason to believe that this will be the situation, but in case of nuclear war, this is all we have. That we hope that somehow sanity will prevail, and then we'll stop before pressing the button. And again, this is coming back to the dismantlement of the system itself. In the United States, is simply not only falling apart as a world hegemon, but also falling apart as a hegemon in its own area. It will not be able to exert power within its own borders soon. So I'm really afraid that the situation will erupt there, that it will turn into a civil war, or turn into a violent clash between factions, or just everybody against everybody. These type of situations where just simply the system falls apart so fast that the leaders will not be able to realize what's going on, like it happened in the Soviet Union, in the early 90s or the late 1980s. I lived through the collapse of the Eastern Bloc, and just within a couple of months, what seemed to be an impenetrable system simply fell apart in front of our eyes. Really, literally, it just blew up and then vanished forever. This is crazy and unimaginable for many people living in the West. But since I have seen that happening already, I can easily imagine that the same thing will happen in the United States or in any other Western nation or even the European Union, just simply could blow up and then fall apart very, very fast, faster than the people in the charge, could, decide what to do next or press the red button or do anything, crazy. The system will just simply stop obeying their orders and then just simply dismantle itself very, very quick.
Yeah, no, exactly. But that makes me think of one of there's a Chinese maxim about the insiders confuse themselves. It's the closer you are to the situation, the more confused sometimes you can get. And I think that it's such an interesting way of framing that, in terms of like maybe there's a naivete to Westerners because they've had it so good in many ways that just as the crisis is like staring them right in the face, they're still credulous and they still have difficulty actually accepting the reality. Whereas if you come from maybe a developing country, you have tasted bitterness, you've tasted some level of disappointment, and you don't have the basic default assumption that the thing works, So maybe in some ways Americans are in a very poor position because just as this thing, I think a lot of Americans still think the institutional structure, well, there's some guy behind the guy who will tap the guy on the shoulder that will prevent this thing from happening. Even though we've seen so many of those fail-safes just collapse.
And this is the same thing which happened in the Soviet Union. Exactly, the people in the top just shut the door on themselves and then created an echo chamber around the Politburo. This is the same thing which is I see unfolding in the United States. More and more senile leaders are elected into power, and I mean both of the leaders from both sides of the aisle, I believe, going very senile very fast. And then the Politburo in the background, or the political, deep state, or whatever you wish to call it, the administrating staff trying to decide things among themselves, and they are fighting their inward battle, against each other, one department against the other, or one lobby group against the other. There are many lobby groups in the White House, I believe, which are just fighting with each other and trying to get the upper hand. And then at the end, they will just lose sight of what is really happening on the streets, or in a worst case scenario, they realize what is happening on the streets and try to use it for their advantage and then create a rebellion, just hoping that this will help their cause. In the meantime, this could quickly spiral out of control, and if violence, if once let loose, then it will just rage over the country as a wildfire. So this is a very dangerous situation we are right now in, because as you mentioned, the leaders are just confused and then lost in their own echo chambers. They are just hearing that how great they are, how great America is, how great the West is, how Western values are above everything else. We are the indispensable nation. We are the people who know the best. And then suddenly they realize they don't know nothing. They know nothing really about real life and reality. While people on the streets already realize that the system is already done and dead. And this is when disobeyment will start, when people will start disobey orders, even in the military or even in the lower ranks of the government. They simply just stop functioning because there will be a mass rebellion against the system itself.
Tell me if this is a fair characterization. You mentioned about the sort of dawn of agriculture. I think that there's some type of evidence of the first bread was made 17,000 years ago. Right. So let's just use that as a marker in time. 17,000 years ago, humans discovered sufficient cultivation techniques to create a dawn of agriculture. Right. Now, over time, right, we've had moments of technological leaps leading all the way to the Bronze Age, stone, bronze. Into the Renaissance and the information, industrial information age. Is it fair to characterize that we've essentially been playing this musical chairs, where we've switched one technology, and just as the collapse was about to be, in a sense, wrought upon humanity, we then said, okay, let's go into further debt and then create a bigger hole for ourselves. We've done that 10 times, 20 times, 30 times in major leaps in human history. And now we're at a point where this time we may not be able to recover. This is the big one. This is the one where there's no further round 31, which we can then say, okay, let's just go into the next level of debt. This is when the musical chair stops.
Yes, this is what I also strongly believe. That again, this has a very simple geological explanation, because all the easy to mine stuff, which started the Bronze Age, for example, when you had the pickaxe and the stone tools, you had only the chance to get the ores which are close to the surface, lying on the hillside or in river banks. You collected those ores, smelted in a simple fire or using charcoal from the remnants of a fire. And then you just made some cairns and then simple technologies, which made possible to advance technology step by step, again, from Bronze Age to Iron Age and to next steps. It was basically a staircase approach. So if you just, making the first step, then you can make the next step and then the next step. But the staircase was not, a simple staircase. It has missing steps. So sometimes people just fell in between steps, and then came the Dark Ages. So that can also happen. But then they always recovered. They recovered the old knowledge, how to make bronze, how to make iron, and things like that. And then they rebuilt civilization, as it were. But in our case, we are using up so much raw materials, and this is what people simply cannot comprehend. But in the last 30 years, for example, we have used as much copper as in the past 10,000 years across the human history. So we are using crazy amounts. And in order to provide for this hunger for copper and hunger for other resources, we went very deep into mines. We're just mining basically dead rocks, which are containing 1% copper or even 0.1% of a copper, which again, if civilization happens to fall, if this one happens to fall, and we will have to start again from step number 1, we will not be able to access copper because we will not have the machinery to again power up these huge mines, these huge excavators, these huge trucks. And if we are going down into this mine, like one we have in Chile, then we will have again a pickaxe. And then what will we do? We will mine rocks with 1% copper ore content. It's simply not worth the energy which you invest in it. So this will simply make it impossible to restart in industrial civilization if it is really gone and if it's really dead. And it doesn't mean that the civilization will die, in 10 years because we run out of stuff. Again, this is going to be a very gentle slope from a historical perspective. It can last 50 years or 100 years or 150 years, who knows? It can be a very long process, but in the end, when all the accessible fossil fuels will run out, when all the accessible copper and all the accessible iron and all the other raw materials will run out, then we will be left with a ton of material which are built into the infrastructure and built into houses and roads and networks. And also we will have a very shitty quality or very low quality materials in the ground, which we will not be able to harness anymore because we don't have the energy to harness them anymore. So basically this makes this civilization a one-time affair in the planet's history. This cannot be repeated anytime soon. I mean, in geological timescales, it would take 50 million years to replenish these ores or replenish the fossil fuels, etc. It will replenish, but not in human timescales. So this means that once this civilization is gone, the best we can do is to scavenge the raw materials which we have already mined and already processed with the help of fossil fuels, like all the copper from the wiring in the houses, or all the aluminum and all the iron and things like that. There will be plenty of it. So since, as we mentioned, the current capacity of the planet will drastically decrease due to the inavailability of oil and availability of diesel fuel and things like that, there will be plenty of empty houses left and plenty of ruins left after we leave. And then will come again climate change. This is going to be another complicating factor, as it will not stop by the end of the Industrial Revolution. It will continue since we have a lot of carbon already in the atmosphere, which we have no way of getting rid of in a technical way. So this means that climate change will continue well after the civilization is gone, which means that seas will rise, burying a lot of cities under a swamp or just sinking it underwater, and also making a lot of cropland totally unviable because they will turn into deserts. So this means that the carrying capacity of the planet will shrink further still, even after civilization is gone. There's going to be a very long effect after this one is gone, which means that in a 4 to 5 degrees hotter planet, and this is again the best case scenario here, the worst case could be 10 degrees hotter planet, there will be only a tiny sliver of land between the, or around the North Pole, which would be habitable and which will, may be able to support people in a very wise manner if they are inventing new agricultural techniques, only not the stealing type of agriculture, but regenerative agriculture. Maybe they can survive in this tiny sliver of land around the North Pole, which will be still in a habitable climate zone. The rest of the planet will be either desert or lush jungle, which will be simply not supporting human life because it will be simply too hot for us to survive in the summer months, especially. So this means that we will both lose the agricultural land and both lose the minerals which supported civilization, which again lands us in a situation, several hundred years into the future, where only a very tiny fraction of humans will be alive, or compared to today's numbers, so maybe just a couple of million people will live on the planet. They will recycle everything what they can. But then once they run out of recyclable material, because recycling itself is inefficient, it is 90% efficient at best, which means that you will lose 10% in each round of recycling. This means that if you are recycling the old materials harvested by the civilizations, in a few cycles, in 10 cycles, you will basically run out of almost everything. You will be left only a couple of percentage points of material left, which you can use. But then after few more cycles, you will run out of basically every other material except wood, which will be still growing in forests. So you will be back into a very Stone Age or Wood Age-like civilization, which will be sustainable for a long period of time, but will surely not be able to produce this type of high-tech stuff which we are using today.
Like in the movies, when you see like a cowboy movie, Western movie, and you see the cowboy having a fight with the Native American, and then the Native American just shaking his head like, dumb cowboy just doesn't get it, and then just get blown away by the cowboy. But really, you have to say, like, listening to what you said, basically what you're describing is all of the indigenous people on Earth had the right idea.
Exactly.
Everyone else basically just screwed it all up.
Exactly.
If we just stuck to literally every single indigenous culture, right, where there's some natural inherent carrying capacity that's based on a unit of 10 people or 50 people or maybe 100 people, right, in that sort of unit, and you looked after, you knew everyone in your little community, right? You don't get into this like you talk about in these bureaucracies, right? We just went and we go this, and we have to 100 now has to be 1,000, and then to get 1,000 people, you need to create 100 jobs of managers and supervisors of the other 900 people, right? We've done this by times 10,000, 10 times a million. If we just stuck to the indigenous knowledge, we would have never had this problem. We would have never had this civilization, but we would have never had this problem.
Exactly. And this is what the indigenous peoples of North America teach or taught the colonizers, the French and the Brits. They were really wise and very good thinkers, and they had really good orators who could speak the language of the colonizers, and they had really good discussions. I don't know if you know the story of Kondiorang, or maybe I'm pronouncing his name wrong. He was an indigenous elder who was very, very wise and knew a lot about power structures, how civilizations basically destroy themselves just thanks to having this mentality what we have just described. But they had really good discussions between the French and this guy, and these discussions basically was that sparking the Enlightenment revolution in Europe. because people just started to realize that, hey, why do we have kings? Why do we have this stupid monarchy around us when things could go much in a much different way? Unfortunately, they did not get the core of the message that you should dismantle civilization as soon as you can because it will self-destruct. So they continued with civilization after the Enlightenment. But had they learned the lesson, we would not have this issue at all, as you mentioned. So if we could live within planetary boundaries, that means that we are sustainable. We are outside planetary boundaries, that means by definition we are unsustainable, which means that this civilization will have to stop.
Totally. The funny thing though is that I don't, speaking for myself, I don't feel like I have the right to have too much romanticism for the Indigenous culture because I'm not Indigenous and I come from the city. The city is my people. That's all I know. At some point, it's the sins of my people, the sins of the city folk that we're now having to pay up for, right? I don't think it's something where we can just sit there and have nice language or say sorry or do something like that. Like we've dug this hole for ourselves. We have to confront it.
Exactly. And we are actually so deep in the hole that it's sad to say, but it's too late for us, city folks. So we have already cooked ourselves or buried ourselves in this hole. And even if we
That's
start
our
digging,
tribe. It's the fate of our tribe, right?
Yes. And even if we are in a hole and stop digging, we will be still in a hole. So that will not save us at all. So actually what we will witness here is that we will, either have a mad scramble back to a more sustainable way of life, or either we will have this crazy apocalypse if the leaders have what they wanted to have, this crazy war, if that's what they are after. But probably it's going to be the messy middle, which means that we will have this very long, very protracted decline, which will mean a lot of hardship for many people. And even us, we are, I believe, both in our 40s. So we will, just witness the slow decline of civilization. And by the time we die, we will still see some civilization around and many things which are still working, but many things which are not working at all. Population will start to decline somewhat, but there will be wars, there will be famines, there will be this and that, but nothing of a catastrophic scale. So, things will just, continue to be bad, and then just going to be sometimes better in some years, and then sometimes bad again. And then people after us, even our children or grandchildren, basically I would say grandchildren, by the time they're born in the mid 40s or mid 50s, they will only know the world which is in decline. So for them, this is going to be perfectly normal. I used to grow up as a rich kid, but now I used to be poor, or I get used to living on a wage in a hand-to-mouth fashion. And this will be perfectly normal for them because this is what they will experience as normal. And then a few more generations after 50 or 100 years, then we simply just completely run out of everything affordable, and we start to reuse and scavenge what we have. Then that will be the perfectly normal course of affair for those type of people who will be there in the turn of the century. And then again, returning to a more agricultural lifestyle, returning to wooden huts and things like that will be perfectly normal for those people who are living in the 22nd century.
So we still have sauna.
Yes, that's sauna. It's still possible if you burn wood, but there can be good things in life as well. So it doesn't mean that if you are just looking at through the civilizational lens and what values you have, like having a nice house, having air conditioning is a value, or having a nice garden and things like that. If that's a value for you, then it's going to be a series of losses, which is not possible to maintain in a declining energy situation. But if you value community, if you value family, if you value good relationships, or if you value just a simple, free time, because if companies go bankrupt, you will not be able to, sit in a chair and then and do desk work. You will have to go out and then tend for the garden, but after that, you will be able to enjoy a glass of wine in the porch, and then you will just watch the sunset, because there will be good times in decline as well. It doesn't mean that it will be a very sad period of life. It can be a very good period of life. Just as you think of your old age, old age is full of losses. You lose your abilities, you use your eyesight, you get slower, you get mentally foggy and things like that, but still you will have very nice days when you will just simply sit around and enjoy. Even in your declining phase of your life, you will still enjoy life itself, because life is beautiful, people are beautiful, relationships are beautiful, and this is what's worth living for, and not the material stuff we have all around us.
When we talk about the green lobby, when we talk about net zero, I mean, if we accept some of the basic precepts that you're talking about, it seems just insane, right? Because what they're talking about with net zero is this idea that, well, we just have to make a couple changes here and there, and we, do a couple tweaks here, but don't change any fundamental things about your lifestyle. Don't address any of the core issues. It's just, we're going to tweak a few things here, and smart people in the market, and get everyone around the table, and then we'll sort it out. That sounds crazy, doesn't it?
It is, but this is the logic of the system, and the system cannot, change itself from within. This is how leaders are taught in the business schools. This is what they see in the business life. That if they come up with a clever invention, or they come up with a clever product, they can get rich if they, find the ways to produce them en masse. And this is what happens all around us. They come up with a clever idea to have solar panels, and then that's what they make. But they can only make it because they have still fossil fuel infrastructure around them, which enables the manufacturing of these goods. So as long as we have this ecosystem of technology around us, no one will believe what we are talking here. No one will believe that we will live in wooden shacks 100 years from now. No one will, believe that civilization will go into decline. Everybody will believe what they saw in their past lives, be them corporate leaders or politicians. Everybody grew up seeing that things get better and better, more technology, more stuff, more energy, everything just got better. Why expect anything turning or going to be otherwise? And it will be the silent masses, the everyday people who will first experience the decline, not these elites, not the corporate elites, not the political elites, but the silent masses who work hard every day to earn a living and earn the wage. They will face immense difficulties feeding their families, powering their homes and things like that. And again, as the base disappears and will not be able to support this overhead of managers and elites, then they will have to again come to the realization that this is not sustainable and this will not be sustained. But I believe we are still decades away from that. So we will not, have an enlightened leadership anytime soon, if that's what we are hoping for.
Well, I mean, I think one of the phrases that you use, I forget which article that it pops up in, but I think it was the two Achilles heels of complex systems, where you talk about this. It's sort of like we add layer upon layer of complexity, right? It's like the AI revolution now is adding another layer of complexity onto what is already a complex system, right?
Right.
So in the pursuit of the infinite growth, in the pursuit of, further mass conveniences for the consuming population, we are now taking on potentially a massive unknown, right? We know, sure, when it works, it's great. But what happens when it doesn't work? What happens when it starts making certain assumptions that benefit certain groups and disfavoring other groups? So you use this phrase, forced simplicity, right? I think that's your phrase, where basically we're going to hit a moment where basically if we're not smart enough, and it seems like we haven't demonstrated this as humanity, but if we don't simplify things ourselves, the system collapse is going to it's going to absolutely punish us with forced simplicity. Is that right?
It is exactly right, and this is where again the denial of leadership comes into picture, because since they are denying that the system has arrived at the turning point, they will keep pushing these technologies like AI. They will keep pushing complexity, because what if AI, if it's not an additional layer of complexity, an additional layer of energy consumption on top of every energy consumption we have, this is basically working against the system. So this is how the system basically self-destructs. It instead of stepping on the brakes, it steps on the accelerator, and then just starts to use more energy than it would be wise to use. So if we would realize that we are running low on energy and we are running out of easy to access minerals, then we would dial back energy use. And what do we do instead? We dial up energy use with this Bitcoin craziness and also this craziness called AI. We are just putting more burden on the system, which actually brings its collapse more closer and closer, because we will just simply eat up all the energy available, and then comes the moment of realization. And this is exactly why capitalism and all these type of systems have crises, because they overpush everything. They over leverage everything, and then they just pile energy use upon energy use, or investment upon investment, in hopes that it will return, and it will pile up in a huge spike and then a huge fall. And this doesn't mean that civilization collapses one day from another, but it means that an economical crisis or a energy crisis can appear one day to the next, which means that from yesterday they think that everything is fine, but then next day the stock market is collapsing. People are selling like crazy everything, and then buying up fixed assets, or buying up commodities like oil and copper and things like that. And we see a huge market upheaval, a lot of companies going bankrupt one day to the next. So it could be Black Friday, Black Thursday, as it happened in 1929, when the stock market collapsed and starting the Great Depression. It could be again all over again, just 100 years difference, but the people are the same and the behaviors are the same. People are just putting on bets upon bets, doubling down on stupid, and then at the end everything collapses like a house of cards.
So, Honest Sorcerer, tell us a little bit about your journey to get to this point, right? I mean, I can't imagine that as a teenager were you already a doomsday guy, or did you have a moment, where you went from a sunnier disposition to just being struck by this realization? How did you reach that point?
This latter. And it was such a sudden and such a fast experience that I felt really shocked. So as a teenager and as a young adult, I grew up believing in technology and science. I had a dream that even if I die one day, my long descendants will step on Mars or step on another planet, and then they will continue to populate that. I was really a sci-fi fan. I was really fan of intergalactical empires building up, and then spaceships flying around faster than the light and things like that. So I was fully enmeshed in this system. And then in my early 20s, I learned about peak oil. This is when I attended university as a undergraduate student for mechanical engineering and sciences. And then it really struck me that, hey, this is a crucial moment in our life. This if this stuff runs out, we are really in a bad situation. And then we could really starve, and I had no idea what to do with it back then. So I just buried the idea very deep inside my knowledge. I went back to denial. I was in full denial that this could ever happen. And then, fortunately or not unfortunately, shale oil came into the picture, and then Canadian tar sands came into the picture, and oil production started growing again. And I said, okay, well, no problem, we will solve it with technology. Then climate change came into the picture. I also believed, okay, then we will switch to solar panels, no problem, and so on and so forth, until May 2019, I read an article by David Walswells, The Uninhabitable Earth. And then I realized that, hey, this is not going to be a smooth ride. So this is not going to be a smooth ride into a solar-powered future. This is going to be very rough. And we are likely underestimating the effects of climate change. And I looked up, okay, what could be a 4C word look like, which was then already forecasted by the end of century, instead of a 1.5 degrees world, which sounds laughable, just in 10 years, time. Then I realized, okay, then in this 4C world, it's impossible to make an interplanetary civilization because then we will be struggling to feed ourselves. And then I started looking into the history of the previous civilizational collapses. And then I learned that civilizations tended to collapse due to exactly this reason, like climate change and then running out of stuff. And I started to, investigate a little bit deeper and deeper and deeper. And as I dig deeper and deeper, basically in a few months' time, maximum 1 year, I realized that this civilization is over, no matter what we do. So it really took me less than a year to realize that this stuff is gone. And then everything which happened then, the COVID pandemic and the subsequent wars, subsequent energy crisis, all seem to reinforce this knowledge, what I have gained, and that this is really the turning point of civilization. And luckily and thankfully, I also came across the work of John Michael Greer, who I really respect, who pointed out that this is not only a recurring phenomena, but it's also a very slow wave which is going through the system. So this is not a one day to the next affair when we just run out of stuff one day to the next. And then he introduced me to the idea of catabolic collapse, which means what we have basically discussed throughout the episode, that we are just simply living up the past inheritance of raw materials and stuff. We were just releasing a lot of capital, be it fixed capital or be it monetary capital, as companies go bankrupt or as countries go bankrupt. There will be a lot of raw materials which are not going to be used because of the economic crisis, which will significantly slow down the collapse of the system itself. So I learned that it's more likely to be a stepwise collapse and lasting very, very long usually. And this is where I'm today. So this is what I'm investigating every day, and this is what makes me really interested in the situation. That knowing that this is not going to be a doom-like scenario where everything ends in one day, because then what's the point? Then what's the point living if it's ends just one day to the next? I really started to believe that this is going to be a very long affair, and this is worth studying and worth telling about, so that people will realize that this is going to be a long affair affecting their lives, their children's life, their children's children's life, and things so on. This is the knowledge which worth spreading, so they will not turn to demagogues and populist politicians who will tell them that, hey, the good days can return, because it is impossible for them to return. Good days will never return. We will, embark on a long descent, and this is which we have to adapt to. And this is why we have to look for solutions in a local way, not trying to change the system, because the system itself is unsustainable and unreformable. It is just going ahead according to its own inertia. It has no meaning to trying to fight the system itself. We have to adapt in our little lives what we can. So in our little communities, in our little families, we can do adaptations, or we can just, if you are that type of stoic person, you can just sit back and watch as things slowly fall apart. You will not die from one day to the next because of civilizational collapse. So this is how basically I came to this understanding that civilizations are over and they are on a fundamentally unsustainable affair.
Well, it's you're writing, and that's the thing about speaking with you, is that to hear your voice, you have such a powerful, eloquent voice. It's just I find the content of what you say very hard to dispute. But on top of that, the way that you weave it together, and there's so many aspects of the issue. It's not an easy, sort of story to weave together. So my hat's off to you, in terms of just the great work that you do. So thank you for that.
Thank you for the kind words.
For sure. Because, what we're trying to do, I'll just tell you a little bit about what we're trying to do. Vanilla Club, we are a small organic plantation in North Queensland. And really, when I first started the idea, we were really a lot more, how would you say, luxury and wellness oriented, and, we really wanted to create this really sort of high-end exclusive, micro resort that was luxurious and so on and so forth. But I think it really was never me. I mean, I think for me, having something that's real, having something that is community based, that is a place where people from different walks of life can meet up. We can eat organic food. We can talk about the issues in the world, and we can do it in a safe and, very scenic, natural setting. That's basically what we're doing, is trying to create a little patch on Earth where we can have some great food, we have fresh water, we have some nice organic produce, and we can hike, and we can have some simple dinner parties where like-minded people can get together and just connect.
Exactly.
In a way, it's similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. This is a really good approach. So this is how you can teach people, and this is also an educational approach. This is how you can teach people that, there is life after, this high-tech civilization. You can show them how to grow food in an organic way without, polluting the land with chemicals and things like that. So you can also, try to teach them to enjoy life in its natural beauty, like a scenic landscape, or like a good glass of wine, or a well-prepared food, or everything, which is, this is the simple joys of life, which is completely possible and completely feasible, even without this high-tech bonanza what we have around us. So even if we don't have computers or internet anymore, or we don't have cars, or neither electric nor gasoline, we can still enjoy a very good life. But we have to learn how to enjoy it and how to do it. And this is where your work comes into the picture. And this is, I'm also grateful that there are people like yourself who can create this kind of mini paradise around themselves and show the people that this is possible, that life can be beautiful, even amongst all the crises what we have all around us.
And I think that one thing for me is, like, people crave that, people use that word authenticity. I'm not so sure I really like that word. I just think it's just honesty. And that's why, when you have to be brave to call yourself honest anything, but I think talking to you today, I mean, you deserve that. If anyone deserves it, it's you. Is to call yourself honest something. I mean, most people in the capitalist system, they run. When they hear honest, they think of the Nigerian prince in the scam email. They think of some scam, some type of thing. It's something. So on one hand, I'm skeptical when I hear honest, but then I'm like, okay, when we've had this amazing conversation, and you're willing to put your heart and soul into it, and really put yourself up for any examination. I don't have the scientific chops to, jockey with you back and forth, but obviously just with common sense, with some sense of the world, people can parse BS, and you're talking real. This is like real talk. There's no nonsense here.
Thank you.
So.
Actually, the name the Honest Sorcerer is a joke itself, because sorcerers are not the best kind of people. They are the evil persons who are trying to curse other people. So this type of evil people, and this is came from, again, how to say, the disposition of an engineer. Because we are, as engineers, are basically sorcerers of the system. We are the persons who are creating all this magic, but this is not without drawbacks, or not without negative side effects, which will then come back to haunt us. So this is when a confessions of a mage, or a confessions of an evil mage who is creating evil magic all around himself, and then try to make good of it, or try to explain, okay, how is this not sustainable, and how is it can create a huge backlash on us.
Yeah, but I mean, honest I really think is authenticity has some marketing to it. I think honest is actually the real word. I mean, you can say that, yeah, it's a bit of a joke, but at the end of the day, you still have to stand behind honest. If you were dishonest in some way, you couldn't live up to that title, And I think this is really where we're at in the world, is that it's like people are desperate for honesty. They're just desperate. They don't even know how to verbalize it, but they're so cynical. The whole system, if there's a system of anything, it's a system of cynicism,
Exactly.
and honest, is definitely I would say you live up to the billing. And speaking of the community, the dream I have really with our little organic plantation is also to have kind of like speakers events, to have interesting people who are talking about, who have a point of view about the world, to get together and share over a meal that's like home, locally prepared. We have some music, we have some fire, campfire, basic stuff, which I think is stuff that people want. So, if there's ever a chance that we could somehow connect with you for one of those events, you would be an honored guest.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's basically an honor to be invited in such a circle. So thank you. If I manage to arrange travel plans, then I'm fully open to it.
Okay. Before the carbon credits go up too much in price.
Yes.
Okay. Or before the turbulence gets too bad. On the show we're gonna meet with someone who's an aviation expert, and one of the questions was, at some point, once the global climate, the warming is going to reach a point where we might not be able to fly, because of the clear air turbulence.
Exactly. I also I read about this story, and it's really crazy. So it can really upset your journey.
Anyways, well, I'm going to really read your Substack with just even more attention after speaking to you on this, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing so honestly with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Okay. All the best to you.
Thank you. Same to you. Goodbye.
Okay. Thank you.